Okay. Anyway, it's great to see that there are so many people that are interested in the Colorado Resiliency Framework update. It's good to see people that I haven't seen in a long time as well. So this meeting is being recorded, like I said, for those who just jumped on. So if you don't want to be seen, turn off your camera. But today our goal is to briefly go over the DQ, add some further info that may help you in your determination as to whether to submit a proposal. In addition, there will be a time for questions. The questions raised today will be added to those written questions that were submitted by the deadline. We had over 50 questions. So from those, we kind of took some themes, and Shale will go over those. Everything's going to be posted in one answer document. So all the questions from today and all the questions that we received by the written deadline. If you have any questions and you simply want to type them into the chat, feel free to do that. We can grab those as we go along. And with me today, I have Ann Miller, the CRO director. I have Shale Sabo, the Resiliency Program Manager, and Marguerite Hardin, the Local Resilience Manager. And so with that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Ann.
Thank you, Brenda, and thank you all for spending part of your Friday afternoon with us. And thanks for your interest in this, what we think is a really exciting project. And, you know, we're not going to go over the actual scope because you all have read that. So this really is an opportunity for us to highlight maybe some of the things that we're really looking for out of this project and then answer your questions. The context, as you know, in this evolving practice of resilience across the country, we're now one of 12 states that have resiliency offices. And we were out in front 10 years ago and had the first resiliency framework in 2015, the first of its kind in the nation. And the practice has evolved. Marguerite and I just came from a conference of a lot of folks doing state resiliency work and local resiliency work in New Orleans called ResCon, which just got back last night. So we're kind of all jazzed about the opportunity for this framework to take our state to the next level. We've made such great strides working collaboratively across state agencies, and really as this framework being our call to action. And each framework, so 2015 and then 2020, the update with different challenges. In 2015, it was really focused largely on disaster recovery and the shock event of the floods and fires. And then in 2020, as we all know, there were different challenges. And yet again, in 2025, we're reeling from a lot of uncertainty. So we're really looking for a consultant team that can bring creative energy and insights and help us take this to the next level in really identifying the gaps to build resiliency across Colorado and actionable strategies that we can actually measure and show progress. So this is funded with a federal FEMA hazard mitigation grant program in the amount of $155,000. So it's relatively streamlined budget here. And again, we're not starting from scratch. We're building. This is an update, but we want to innovate and again, sharpen our pencil so that we really have a pretty clear marching orders and action plans to work across state agencies, but also with our partners to implement. So one of the things I wanted to highlight that is important in this update is one of the scope items around implementing metrics and targets. In our statutes that created our office, we've got specific language charging us to develop resilience metrics to effectively measure short and long-term success of resilience efforts and actions. So what we'd like to do in this framework is at the beginning and throughout the whole planning process, really be thinking about, as we develop those strategic actions, and really to address those gaps and collaborative actions where there are gaps and needs, that we're really thinking about how are we able to move the needle. And so we're trying to get a little more specific this time. Yes, this is a framework. Yes, it provides, we're going to be building off of the goals and vision. And so that some of this stays the same, but this really, the action plan is where we're really wanting this planning process and the engagement process and the whole gap analysis and data analysis, really an understanding of the landscape of what's already out there with other state plans, but we're not duplicating, but we're really figuring out that sweet spot where we can, again, take strategic action and see results so that Colorado is more able to adapt and thrive in the midst of all these changing conditions. So I think with that, I'll just turn it over to Shale, who is our project manager and our local resiliency manager, to address some other highlights.
Great. Thank you so much, Anne, and nice to meet you all. Shale Sabo, and as Anne mentioned, I'll be the one that you'll be coordinating with quite a bit if you are hired to support this project. So I wanted to just go over a couple of things that I would also like to highlight, but then also clarify some of the responses or answers to some of the questions that we're seeing some patterns around. So first and foremost, to kind of clarify the time frame for this planning project, we do want the planning to be completed for the most part through the end of 2025. It is a 2025 update, but we do have the flexibility to go into March 2026 if needed. But again, with it being a 2025 update, we don't want to drag it into the next year too far if we can help it. But we do have that flexibility if needed. Something I want to highlight here is that the goal of the framework is that it's really not meant to be a traditional state plan. So to build resilience, and I'm sure a lot of you understand this, but it requires not doing things the same way that we've always done them. And it does really require that we are creative and that we embrace innovation and build systems that allow us to address disruptions that we may not even know are yet to come. So we should be really building systems that allow for that flexibility for us to be able to adapt to changing future conditions. And this update really should be that guiding beacon that helps drive the state in this way, so that we're developing strategies that not only garner buy-in and clear understanding, but actually carry us forward from being in reactive states to proactive. So just really want to highlight that we really are hoping that this is not a framework update that is traditional in that sense, and that is kind of along the lines of what is typically done in state government. This also will include our approach to our inclusive and community engagement. There were several questions around our engagement process. So this is a plan that drives state action, but really should reflect the diverse needs of Colorado communities. And by doing that, should also incorporate the best available data and information, and also integrate subject matter expertise effectively. So as far as like the specifics of the community engagement plan, we have some kind of initial thoughts, such as the fact that we want to utilize those key areas of impact or areas of vulnerability that were outlined in the scope of work. There was 7 that were listed in there. And really those are kind of a initial list. They're not necessarily set in stone of where the state has identified through doing this process several times, where we think that there's ability to take action and produce outcomes that are inherently resiliency building. And so we feel like this is a great place to start to form such things as roundtable discussions with subject matter experts, or piggybacking off of existing community events. And then we also, of course, have virtual capabilities to do virtual events. And while the CRO will lead some of the community engagement efforts, we do really encourage and welcome input and feedback from consultants in their proposals on innovative practices that we maybe haven't considered in state government, or ways that we can strengthen the outcomes of our community engagement process as well. So we really recommend or encourage and welcome any sorts of thoughts or ideas that you might have on how we can form a really effective community engagement plan this time around. Also, that being said, we continue to value a holistic approach to resilience. So I think if folks have looked on our website, they can see that we have a pretty broad definition when it comes to resilience. However, what we really want to do in this framework update is really have strategies that result in targeted outcomes and truly address the greatest areas of risk and vulnerability that our state is facing. So we don't, again, want this to be a plan that's necessarily duplicative of other plans. We have a lot of really great statewide planning efforts that are currently ongoing, such as our climate preparedness roadmap or our Colorado water plan that have very focused direction and strategies. So we don't want this to be something that kind of duplicates what those are doing. They should be very well integrated with other plans. But we do want to focus on collaborative and collective actions that meet the criteria of strengthening resilience and make the greatest impact with the resources that we have available. And then kind of one of the last areas that I saw where there's quite a few similar questions was around access to data, which is a very good question. So as far as the data that would be required for things like updating our risk assessment, we will help as the CRO team, whoever the consultant is, to get that information from state agencies as appropriate. So if you need some of the data from the risk assessment from our enhanced state hazard mitigation plan or our climate preparedness roadmap, we can coordinate with those state agencies as needed to get that information. And then as far as some of like the data visualization tools and platforms, the state does need to comply with digital accessibility requirements. So that does kind of limit us as far as the breadth of data visualization tools that we can use. But again, as far as it comes to data integration, that is also something that we welcome and encourage from proposals to help us to think through where we might be able to more effectively integrate data or ideas that you might have. The state is fortunate in that we have a lot of really great existing tools like the Colorado State Forest Atlas or the Wildfire Risk Viewer or EnviroScreen and tools like that. And we will definitely want to capitalize on those and use those as far as our kind of first initial approach. But again, encourage and welcome any folks who have really robust data knowledge to help us think through where we might be able to strengthen that. So I think that's kind of the overall input that I had and things that I really wanted to highlight. So I think at this point, Brenda, if it's good with you, I think we can open up for questions.
I think that's a good approach. And so anybody that wants to jump in, please do. And either raise your hand or type it in the comment boxes. Vera?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Vera Mitzner from the Colorado State University. I do have a question about the indirect cost rate. Do you have a specific rate that could be used at the proposal?
So this is a federally funded project. So because of that, unfortunately, indirect costs are not allowed.
Okay, I just need to know. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. Becky?
Oh, Becky, I think you're muted.
Thanks. It does help to come off of mute. I know that the RFP did talk about metrics and being able to display those. And it wasn't exactly like it was saying you wanted a new dashboard, but definitely the metrics that go along with that. And there was the mention of being able to use Drupal. So I guess my question for you is, are you expecting new web pages that would be able to show basically a site? And do you have any kind of, besides are you expecting another story map or different kind of technology to be able to show those metrics publicly, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that is a goal of this update as well. As in the past, we've done things like our annual progress report for showing implementation of the framework, but we would like to better visually represent some of the metrics that we're coming up with in this framework update as well, and being able to better have transparency around what that progress looks like. So as part of the proposals too, if you could have some ideas on what like a dashboard could look like or something like that that's compliant with Drupal, we definitely welcome those as well. And again, we just have to meet digital accessibility requirements. And I think we've actually run into some trouble with story maps in the past, unfortunately. I love story maps so much, but I don't know that that's something we can continue to use into the future unless they meet those accessibility requirements.
And then just to add to that, the state, we do maintain the website. So we would be largely responsible for those updates, and content though could be provided, of course, as part of the scope and the planning process. But we wouldn't necessarily turn over, the update of our website to a consultant, but certainly direction, visual, what it might look like, how it might operate, content would be, I think, part of what we're looking for.
Yeah, and I know that having created dashboards before, a lot of the cost really depends on the platform that you're using and the different kinds of things that you're trying to display. And so and it totally makes sense. You should have that and be able to control it, once it's first done, and be able to update it as you need, but not knowing very much about capabilities and what would need to go into that. It's not, to do it well is not necessarily an inexpensive endeavor. Definitely the budget feels pretty tight for a statewide effort with all of the other things, and especially the engagement that's described. Some challenges there, but yeah, if there's any additional information that you can provide on what would be desirable on your side to see, that would be very helpful too.
Some tools that we have used in the past, and I don't know how helpful this is like Google Data Studio or Tableau. I know those are approved, but as far as like our entire list of what we might be able to use, I'm not as familiar with that today, but I can look into it.
Paul, you have your hand up.
Hi, thank you. Just a quick ask for your comment on if you could give us an idea of what the expected engagement for after December 2025 is between the consultants and your team. Like if you could, I don't know, quantify somehow the number of hours you expect the consultants to be involved in what comes after 2025, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I can take a stab at this, and then Anne, if there's anything you want to add. I expect that after 2025, the engagement with the consultant would be a lot more minimal, but more so like making sure that we coordinate with the DOLA communications folks for making sure that the website is good to go. And it's more of that kind of phase of releasing the framework. So I think it's more of just kind of making sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed as far as like the press releases that would be needed and like any kind of content questions we might have for finalizing the document and the website. But Anne, if you feel differently, let me know.
Yeah, I would anticipate that it's more about the refinement of the deliverables. We may have final drafts, but need to go back and forth on just finalizing those deliverables.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I don't see any other hands.
Brenda, it looks like we have some questions in the chat, maybe.
Okay, that's fine. Let's see. Okay, thank you for transcribing that. Public engagement can be a place where budget is easily spent. Can you elaborate on where you see public engagement comes into the process? Will it be virtual or in person? To what extent will CRO be facilitating?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, we've had similar conversations around that element of it. That's why we're kind of considering like a roundtable format for any type of in-person engagement and being very strategic and targeted in what that would look like. The CRO does want to have more of a lead role in facilitating, and then have our consultants support that, as well as any kind of state agency partners that might be involved through the CRWG. And then to help with things like travel costs and, facility costs and that kind of thing, we're also very open to conducting a lot of virtual engagement opportunities as well. Especially for trying to reach communities around the state. But again, we want to make sure that our engagement plan is inclusive. So that's where we definitely will work with the consultant to make sure that we're meeting those needs as well. But Anne, anything else you'd want to add there?
Yeah, as part of our ongoing work with our staff team at the Resiliency Office, we already have engagements planned where we're tagging on and going to a climate youth summit, for example, in a couple months. And we're going to be using any and every opportunity that makes sense to just have that ongoing kind of feedback loop for the framework. So we'll be just as part of our normal course of work, integrating some of the planning input process through like things we're already doing. So this will be continuing to supplement that work and be more strategic. And yes, we are looking for creative ideas from these proposals. We have some ideas ourselves of what that would look like. I do definitely see we had some great participation with our virtual resiliency summits in our 2020 update. So certainly that's a great opportunity to have voices from across Colorado and, that can't get in, can't travel. So, but we also like the idea of, for those more like strategic discussions, having some very thoughtful, strategic roundtable discussions with the right people to be able to come up with solutions to the gaps we've identified in a more targeted way. So, yeah, and then the survey that is actually underway and is a follow-up survey to the one we did in 2019, and that survey is available on our website. We'll be repeating some of the same questions so that we can use that as a baseline to see what trends, what has changed, and then adding some new content in that. And that will also help inform. So that's a data point that is not necessarily part of the scope of this work, other than the integration of the survey, findings and reports. So there's going to be a lot of different data points. Another area I'll just highlight is, there's been a lot of different engagement opportunities on related issues by our state partner agencies. For example, with the climate preparedness roadmap, maybe a year and a half or so ago, they've shared all of their notes from a series of roundtables on some of the similar topics. So what we want to do is we don't want to duplicate. We want to build off of some of the input so we don't have fatigue of asking the same people the same questions, and we can kind of go deeper each time. So there is a lot of room, and that's why we have in the scope the community engagement plan, where we can, when we kick off with the selected consultant, really roll up our sleeves and come up with a really thoughtful approach and strategically use what we would all agree is, yes, a smaller budget. So we are prioritizing the resiliency framework for our staff on our team, and we will all be engaged and be involved. So this does not all fall on the consultant at all, but it's a team effort.
Thank you, Anne. Now, Bob, I think your question kind of got answered already, but if not, please let me know. And then it looks like similar question as Allison about the expectations and engagement. So I'm going to jump down to Paul. Has CRO conducted any assessment of the implementation of the 2020 framework?
We haven't done anything as far as like a formal assessment or an evaluation, but one thing I can point you to is each year we do our annual progress implementation report, and the most recent version is on our website, and then I can make the other reports from 2020 available to the consultant as well. But yeah, as far as like a formal evaluation, I don't think we've done anything in that regard.
Anything to add to that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think drawing off of the annual progress reports is a good starting point, but I think we definitely will want a summation and like what rises to the top in terms of progress. And we saw a similar summary in the 2020 update. So yeah, that definitely will be part of what we're looking for.
Excellent. Now, I knew this was going to come up. The term of the contract award of the solicitation is stated as 5 years. Can you tell us your thinking behind extending it past early 2026 when the update is expected to be completed?
So the term of the contract being 5 years is more reflective of the way that the federal funding comes down from FEMA. They have it in 5-year terms, but our agreement with DHSCM, who's passing the funding through from the federal level, is 2026. So that's why there's a little bit of discrepancy there.
So just to clarify, and this is something Shale mentioned earlier, but yeah, so March of 2026 is really kind of when we're expecting all the deliverables to be finalized for the framework update. And then, yeah, our kind of cutoff with DHSEM is June of 2026. So no, it will not be 5 years. For you, I think it will be March of 2026 is really like the end, what we're targeting as the end date, with the most of the substantive work and content being developed in a draft framework at the end of calendar year 2025. So.
Okay, that looks like the end of the text here. Does anybody else have any other questions? Waverly.
So I know that you addressed this in various places in the RFP, but just thinking about the pretty broad and deep capabilities that the Colorado Resiliency Office staff has, I wonder if you could just maybe share a little bit more about those gaps that you're really looking for in a consultant to help slot in with your team to get this project done.
Yeah, and I saw you nodding vigorously.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess we have Marguerite Harden, on the call here from our team. I would say, we have kind of a broad, expertise as well as like more targeted expertise. For example, Marguerite has expertise in energy resilience. So and kind of in somewhat in that infrastructure space and the natural resources space as well, in climate area. Kate Guibert on our team, the Rural Prosperity Manager, she has the breadth of experience, but also targeted on economic resiliency. And we also have Matthew Jacobs, who is our kind of expert around disaster recovery. And kind of all of us have the mitigation in terms of hazard mitigation expertise, land use planning, community development. So but I think areas where probably some additional focus to supplement our expertise is around like the infrastructure kind of area, critical infrastructure, and really being thoughtful about like what are strategic actions to take to reduce vulnerability there, working of course cross agency. Marguerite, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think that was well said. The 7 focal areas that are printed in the scope are really areas we want to go deeper on, although there may be other gaps, as Cheryl mentioned at the beginning of the call. I also think understanding Colorado's context deeply, while also understanding nationally what else is happening with resilience that we are not doing, would be valuable.
And one other thing I would add to that too is, this happens a lot in state government, but there's a lot of siloing that happens amongst agencies as well. And something that I'd be really curious about as far as like our gap analysis is really getting a better understanding of how state agencies interact with each other and the interdependencies across there. And we have some state agencies that are very good at what they do. I shouldn't say some, all state agencies are very good at what they do. But what I should say is that they're more niched in what they do, right? And that they have a very targeted mission. And so again, how can we look at the gaps without necessarily duplicating what agencies are already doing and really getting into that nitty gritty of where does that collaborative action need to happen in order to really strengthen our resilience? So that's what I'm really curious about too.
Okay. Acclimate Colorado.
I apologize. That is not my first and last name. My name is
Right. I didn't think
Karma
so, but I was going to say,
Yeah.
boy, is that unique.
Yeah. I know. It's just from my email address. I'm from the Colorado Health Institute. My name is Karma Mahmoud. My question is on that thread on engagement. And I think what I would want is sort of like, are there baseline expectations kind of regarding the number or the scale or the types of engagements, like the number of roundtables or the number of, it could be, gathering that information can be done in so many different ways. Key informant interviews, focus groups, roundtables, whatever. Do you have like a baseline kind of, this is ideally what we would like to see? Or, are you looking for sounds like you're looking for the consultant to pitch and propose creative methods, which we can do. But is there kind of like a fundamental baseline for what engagement should look like at the very least to complement both the survey and other inputs that are coming in? If you could speak a little more to that. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to. So we are a little bit, I guess, we have the boundaries around budget and timeline too. So we're really anticipating wanting to do the outreach, through this summer with starting to draft the framework early this fall. So that's going to kind of condense how much we're able to get out in the community as well. In the DQ, there's also some guidance as far as like our state statute on some of the different types of groups that the state statute wants us to really be engaging in. So that's looking at like some community sector groups. And then I think also we didn't mention this in the previous question, but as part of our gap analysis too, we want to take a look at, understanding where we maybe haven't reached some communities in the past that we really want to target this time around. So while I know that doesn't really necessarily help your proposal today, something to consider where maybe if you're reviewing previous frameworks, if you're like, hey, this is an area we haven't targeted yet, we should probably be looking at that.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Shaylee.
And I think, some baseline expectations that I have that we've already referenced, but just to summarize, I would expect at least 1 or 2 like virtual resiliency summits that's like any and all, and really having a more inclusive, and then having 2 to 3 in-person roundtables, perhaps. Again, a consultant doesn't necessarily have to be at those. We will have experts, but to help frame up, these are the questions, this is what we want to get out of it. So there is flexibility there. And there could be some additional, through this vetting process, maybe some additional focus groups that are virtual. So it needs to be adaptive to and be built into the communication plan that it has a little flex in it, obviously, to respond to what we come up with in our gap analysis and what we need to do to target and what the gaps are.
And your hope, and that's very helpful. Your hope is, what I was hearing was your staff, the CRO, that the team at the Resiliency office, and Dora would be the face or the facilitators, and the consultant would be kind of supporting that, or because, or are you looking for a bit of both, depending on what the platform is?
We are looking potentially for a bit of both, but certainly we are well equipped and trained to be facilitators and do this all the time. So we are committed, and this is a priority for our staff this year. So we'll be a little open to, again, the creativity and what's needed. And of course, understanding some budget parameters and timeline.
Perfect. Appreciate it.
One other thing I just want to throw out there is, I understand that there's a little bit of an elephant in the room where we're wanting inclusive engagement, and also knowing that we're a little bit hamstrung by federal requirements that don't allow us to spend money on things like childcare or different types of vouchers for some of that inclusive engagement. But we do have some tools at the state, like CDPHE's community engagement, inclusive community engagement toolkit, and things like that we can utilize as well. So I encourage folks to look at that as well for their proposals.
Yeah, I might just add as well, because we got this question via chat, via written comment and question, and I drafted a response, and I'll just share my screen really quickly. Many of you are probably familiar with this IAP2 spectrum of public participation. And the question really asks, what type of engagement are you not looking for? We see the bulk of the engagements really hovering around collaborate, because of those roundtables, because of that expert engagement that we're looking for. Once we have a draft framework, we will want feedback, we'll want to consult, but really we're not looking for such a mass public engagement process with the public, where it's a one-way communication and inform. So if that helps you kind of think about the type of engagement and how we want to facilitate input, guidance, direction, and feedback on really these 7 deeper areas, that's how I've been thinking about it.
It's super helpful. Thanks, Marguerite.
Thanks, Karim.
Oh, haven't you been waiting a while?
Thank you. I just had more of a logistical question about the reference that should be presented. In case of a team of consultants, should everyone present references, or do you want just the team leader to do it? And I had another question about the indirect costs and other costs not allowed, but I think Marguerite already touched upon those. So thank you.
Brenda, I definitely welcome your input on this, but Anne and I were kind of discussing this just before the call, because we saw the written question on this, Paul, but I think we're okay if we just have the lead folks provide references and samples of work. But Brenda, if you understand differently, please correct us.
So usually we want to see, so you've got your main who's going to be submitting the proposal, and 51% at least has to be done of the work has to be done by that entity. But we also, the state, want to know about the other partner. So at least a couple references there.
So the lead consultant, we would expect project examples and references related to the topic at hand. And any sub-consultants, we would expect the same, as Brenda mentioned. If you have individual support staff supporting the organizations, we don't need references for each individual staff member, but definitely for the main consultant. So I don't know if you're thinking something differently of individuals. We're thinking more firm-wide versus individuals. But certainly, we're project manager leads. We do want to see their qualifications and understand who's going to be leading this effort as well.
And Paul,
now the question came from since we are a university, then we were thinking about integrating multiple experts depending on the different areas that we want to cover, and not all of them would be team leaders. They're just going to be pulled in as we need to do certain analysis with groups. And I was wondering if we need to provide references for all of these experts, because their expertise is there. We just have to show it, and it's a rather large group of people that we're thinking of.
I don't think that in that case you need to submit a reference, but basically you're doing a description of their expertise and why you're pulling them into your team. And then you had another question, Paul. In addition to indirect costs, are there any other costs that are not allowed? And then, Shelley, you were speaking to that about the federal funding.
Yeah, we're just beholden to federal funding requirements and anything there within. So yeah, things like childcare expenses are not allowed. Food purchases for in-person events or any kind of meetings are not allowed. So just kind of standard things like that.
Okay. And then Allison is building off Waverly's question. Beyond gaps in experience, what are you looking for in gaps in the desired scope for where a consultant can best support your internal team? Given the smaller budget, what is it that you need the most help with?
I mean, maybe Shayla, we are looking for resiliency experts that can help us take this to the next level.
Mhm.
So your team needs to demonstrate that you really understand concepts of resiliency and that you can help us. I mean, because we understand that already, but we're really looking for somebody that's on the cutting edge of national and international resiliency trends that we don't have to explain what is resiliency. I mean, these are just like the most basic things. So we are, this is someone who is strategic planning and can really take a multi-objective approach, help advise us to take to the next level. So we are less interested in just a project manager to move things along. We need that. And we need somebody who's really, a team that's really good and has demonstrated that they have done planning projects like this. But it is hard to come by folks that this is an emerging practice. So it is hard to find consultants that maybe have the high level of expertise that we're hoping to generate that can, again, bring that thought leadership to the conversation that does have an understanding of the state landscape, what are the opportunities are, or can help us facilitate that strategic thinking to get there and organize us. And yes, technical expertise as needed is certainly helpful. And as we mentioned before, it is helping us go deeper on these subject areas around economic transitions, kind of the housing area, the critical infrastructure. We do have a lot of expertise in grid and energy resilience, and we can draw on the very large set of expertise among all our state partners. Earlier, Shale mentioned the Colorado Resiliency Working Group. That's our interagency, basically steering committee that we will be drawing on their expertise as well. So I don't know if we, Shale or Marguerite, if you have anything else to add to the question that Allison posed.
Yeah, just piggybacking off of that, and thank you, Anna. I was sitting there being like, what have I not mentioned yet already that I really want to drive home? And I think, again, kind of going back to those like interrelations or those interdependencies, like really helping us to see broadly how these resilience activities can be addressed by multiple factors at play. It's the state agency working group, and how each of them interact, and then also making sure that what we identify as actions at the state level also are able to translate down to the local level. So I guess having that ability to really crosswalk a lot of different complex elements as well, and also the ability to integrate data really effectively, or make sure that our plan is integrated with other plans and really reflective of these multiple different efforts that are happening at the same time, I think is really helpful. But again, it's one of those areas that is tricky for us as well. So, and Marguerite, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
I think that was all really said. I mean, I'm also reading Michael, I think it's Michael's question, and not to jump in for you, Brenda, but the question is around, are there any specific issues that have emerged recently with respect to those experiencing homelessness? And would you like to see that addressed in the update? I mean, we have an Office of Homeless Initiatives. So while like homelessness is pretty well covered within the state, the question here and the expertise that I would be interested in, you know, one of our 7 priority areas is around resilient housing, housing affordability, insurance security, rising cost of living, home ownership, accessibility, you know, so some of homelessness can fit into that, but it's a gap. And so I think it just really is going to take someone who understands resilience and the holistic, you know, we've said this a lot, but holistic and breaking down silos. And so I think it really, like, while I don't want to emphasize homelessness needs to be in it, like maybe it will. And so I think I'm just really looking for a very astute consultant that can synthesize a lot of perspectives and understand what is happening and what's not happening within these spaces. So yeah, that was a great question, and kind of leads into that sort of what gaps are we looking for? Well, we're looking for, first of all, we don't know what we don't know, and second of all, it's those gaps that we're hoping this consultant can help fill by taking in a lot of already expert happenings and work and strategies in order to take this framework to the next level.
Yeah. So
Thank you,
experts.
Marguerite. I didn't see that question, so I really appreciate that you jumped in.
Yeah. And I'll just like, you know, say it again, maybe a little different way. It's just expert facilitation and critical strategic planning, critical thinking and strategic planning that's multi-sector and holistic.
And now these 2 last questions are kind of tricky. Will you be sharing the list of attendees for this info session so consultants can be in touch and assemble teams? I don't have a problem with that. Some folks don't like that. We can do a poll to see if people mind. Next one is, can you share the roster for the Colorado Resiliency Working Group or point it to us online? And I'm sure it's online somewhere.
So we actually don't have it posted online. And do you have any qualms about sharing that, or would you rather we share it with whoever is hired?
It's basically state agencies that most state agencies, and then we have a few federal partners and folks that come in as needed. And we are very open to evolving what that looks like. And understanding how do we bring in some other partners into the mix in our ongoing implementation, and whether it's an advisory committee, in any case. So, you know, it's kind of an evolving list. But I mean, I don't have a problem sending it, but it's pretty much, if you understand, you should understand state agencies and what they are. And that's largely who makes up that body.
Yeah, and Becky, for your follow-up question about sharing organizations and agencies, that's, I think, really easy for us to do. So we could do that.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm going to ask is, does anybody that's on this call have a problem with us listing the people that participated today? Okay, then we'll go ahead and do the roster.
Collaboration already. I like it.
I love that. I love that. I mean, I love teamwork. It's great. Are Are there any other questions, written or oral, that we haven't discussed today?
Waverly just put in a question about posting the link to the 2025 local government survey on resiliency planning. We don't have that yet. It's we just had a meeting with our university partner at UCD that's revising that, but you can anticipate if you look at the 2019 survey and the questions that there will be many repeat questions because we're looking at kind of what's changed. But certainly there'll be a few tweaks. So we'll be sharing that when it's available, and which won't be for a couple months yet.
Great, thank you.
And Karam, thank you for your sharing your information there. Well, the last thing that I was just going to basically go over is just say we're going to put all these questions together and the roster together, and all of this will be in one document. It does say in the solicitation that we're at the estimated date. We're going to try to get the answers published for you all by the 18th. That's still our target date, but if we miss it by a day, please don't get too mad at us. And remember that everything that you submit, you have to email it to me, and it has to be uploaded into BidNet, and it needs to be done by March 24th at 2 p.m. BidNet will lock you out at that point. So everything after that is estimated because we don't know how many of you are going to submit. So we don't know how many submittals the evaluation committee is going to be saddled with. So if it's only 3, it won't take that long. If it's 20, it might take longer. And based on what we read, then we'll see if there's going to be interviews, but interviews are not a guarantee. And then the estimated date, we're shooting for April 10th. So we've got a pretty aggressive schedule, and we're going to try to stick to that as much as possible. I'll be waving the whip at Anne Marguerite's show. And if there's nothing else, I guess we can give some time back to people.
Yeah, and I'll just also thank everyone again for your interest and your time, and we look forward to what comes out of this and having an awesome framework update.
I think it's going to be great. I'm very optimistic. Great questions, good interest. I like it. So everybody, I don't know what the weather's going to be like this weekend. Have a great weekend, either in a coat or shorts, whichever.
It is Colorado. You never know.
You never know. So thank you very much on behalf of DOLA and the CRO team. Very much appreciated that you spent your time with us on your Friday.
Thank
And
you
with
all.
that,
Yeah.
so
Take care.
thank you, everybody.
Goodbye. Thank you.